made written in a different way. So we're going to get to the seamless stuff. We're going to talk about coordination within the SIL. And I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Is that open? Okay. One of the questions that I have is, are your front desk receptionists different from your INR specialist? Well, it all depends. Our entry-level position is our receptionist position, but because, again, that is the first voice that you hear, and that's the first individual that you see when you come into the center, we train that person extensively for INR and get them really, really familiar with the community resources so that they can convey that information to anyone that may call or anyone that may walk into the center. So the other question that I have, I think someone asked if I have a separate survey for the community agencies or the stakeholders. Yes, I do. I have a separate survey that I will be willing to send to Tim, and he's going to post it on the site. I have a separate survey that I send to consumers as well. Pretty much like I mentioned yesterday on the survey that I send to the agencies, we basically want to know how that INR relationship works. If they send someone over to the center, we want to know that that individual, received the services. And particularly with our transition program, we work with multiple agencies and with the consumer, of course, with the consumer's consent. So we want to make sure that that collaboration is a good partnership. And if there are any gaps that we might need to be aware of and to make up any revisions to our process. So.
Program as well tomorrow. Let's see. There was a question about guardianship and what we're doing with forms and documentation, particularly with youth that have guardians. So there was a little bit of confusion there. If someone's under the age of majority, most states under 18, they have guardians, right? Guardianship is different for folks that have reached the age of majority and have had a guardian appointed or they've been declared incapacitated. So it's two different things. We work with children all the time, right? Folks that are under 18, children and young adults. When it comes to just our internal processes, like signing an independent living plan, we don't need a parent or guardian signature on those forms, right? That's our own internal process. I think depending on the funder or your own process as a center, it might be different for you, right? You might need that parental consent for a specific service. In the case of folks that have been declared incapacitated, folks that have a guardian, again, that process internally is just going to be different center to center. It's going to vary depending on what your funding requirements are. For us, getting an ILP signed, something as simple as that, we typically probably wouldn't go to the guardian. It depends on the guardianship too, right? Guardianships aren't all created equal, and so real concrete decisions about what needs to happen there depends on the type of guardianship that someone has. This is really confusing. I wanted to kick it to and learning more. I'm also happy to talk on a break with anyone. So there was a question about what it looks like to provide IL services to really young children. What does consumer control look like? It looks like maybe a question about what that balance is between consumer control and parental input. To be sure, this is not something that we're doing daily, right? We're not seeing a lot of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6-year-olds coming into our center. It happens, albeit somewhat infrequently. When that does happen, we do look to them to exercise consumer control to the greatest extent possible. I went to an IEP meeting with a 6-year-old. We're going to talk about this more tomorrow as well. We don't go into IEP meetings unless we are working with a parent with a disability, right? Or unless we're working on building self-advocacy skills with the young person themselves. So there has to be an understanding of that. Even if it's with a 6-year-old, I had a sit-down talk with the 6-year-old, even though mom was doing most of the talking, right? The 6-year-old and I spoke at length about Did he want me to be in his meeting, right? What was he experiencing in school? Did he want someone helping fight that process in that IEP meeting with him, right? It wasn't the most articulate conversation in the world, but that's how it happened. He gave me the okay. Yes, I want you in that IEP meeting. Yes, I want to be there too, and I want to tell them how what's happening is making me feel. Does that make sense so far? Okay.
And that starts self-advocacy very young and building up that confidence of disability pride as well. I think that situation worked very well in that.
Yeah, and we'll talk more too as we've looked to make our youth programs more robust. We don't just take every IEP meeting that we're invited to, right? That was a big thing that we did for a long time. I think there's a tendency to use the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act as kind of a bludgeoning tool for advocacy. There's a lot of weight that carries, and it's really simple to go into a meeting and hit other professionals over the head with IDEA, and we've had to really closely examine how we do that and what that kind of advocacy looks like for us, and draw some lines in the sand about what we would do with youth consumers and their parents in that process, and what we weren't willing to do. Okay, there was a question about seeing less foot traffic at your center, at your physical location, and what that looks like. We talked about this one for a long time as a group, and we came to the consensus of all of us sitting at the table was that we just listen to our consumers. If we're seeing less foot traffic, there's any number of ways that we've picked up the cues from consumers to deliver services in different ways. We do a youth hangout, for instance, on Google Hangouts, and that's fantastic. I don't know that there's any way to escape really extravagant travel budgets. We put a lot of mileage on our cars still too. We still see traffic at our center, but I think it looks different place to place. But I think the underlying theme there was that we listen to folks. If they need something in a different way, if they need you to text with them, awesome, right? If they need, if they prefer email or they prefer some kind of video conferencing, awesome. All of that is fair game. Did that cover it? Was that pretty much it? Okay, and